Hi, this is Dr. Swapna and I welcome you to your Learn Lab. If you are an IGNOU student looking for help in your studies, then you have reached the right place. Here, we have lecture videos on different core and elective subjects of important IGNOU courses. We aim to help you ace your exams. So hit subscribe to our channel and as you watch, make sure to like and share too. Come and join me on this beautiful learning journey. In this video, we will be doing Unit 7, which is Sampling Techniques of Block 3, Population and Sampling of BPCC-105, which is Psychological Research. Let's see what are we going to study. We will be covering sampling and sampling techniques. We have already seen what is sampling in our previous video. We'll be going deeper into different kinds of sampling techniques. We will be checking out probability sampling techniques, or what are the different techniques that we use for probability sampling. We will see what are the different techniques we use for non-probability sampling. We'll also see what are the advantages and disadvantages of probability and non-probability sampling. And then finally, we'll look at the previous year questions. And we'll start with the sampling techniques. So what is sampling? We have already seen this in a previous video. This is just a quick revision. The process of choosing a sample from a larger population is called sampling. So this is any method that you would choose to, select your sample from a larger population, and this is called sampling. Each individual under observation is known as the sampling unit, which means each of the individual that you have chosen for your sample is called the sampling unit. What are the characteristics of sampling? So we know that sampling is cost effective than census technique. So what is census technique? Census technique is the study wherein you would be performing your study on every single individual of the population. You will not be choosing any sample. You will be simply conducting the study on every individual in the population. Right? So that would take lots of money, lot of time, lot of resources for you to pull it off. But when you are using a sample from a population, it will be more cost effective for you. It would take you less money that you would need to go to each of the individuals and get your data. Right? So what you would be doing, you will be choosing a smaller sample from a larger population and conducting your study on that smaller population, so that whatever results that you are getting from the smaller population will be extrapolated or extended or generalized to the whole population. So sampling is more cost effective than census technique. It saves time, right? Definitely. So which is less time consuming, collecting data from a smaller sample or from the larger population? Obviously the smaller sample, right? So that's why it saves time. If done properly, same reliability as census technique. So obviously you collecting data from every single individual of the population will be giving you a much more reliable data, because you are not leaving off any person. You have fully credible data from every single individual. So here what it says is that if you have selected the sample in a proper way, right, where the sample is a true representation of the population, then you might get the same reliability as you would get if you are collecting the data from the whole population. Right? So you need to make sure that your sample is randomly chosen and it is a true representation of the population, so that you get the same reliable result from the sample that you would have got from the whole population. Now, sampling also allows in-depth study. Now, how is that possible? So instead of, performing the study on 10,000 individuals, if you are performing on 100 individuals, you will have time enough to do an in-depth study on all these people rather than going superficially to all these 10,000 people, right? So when the sample is smaller, it's easier for you to manage them. It's easier for you to, go deep into the study. So that's why sampling will be helping you in in-depth study. It follows scientific approach. Now, this means the selection of sample and then further analysis of the data from the sample, all of this follows a scientific approach. Okay, so it would be well planned, and there is a proper methodology for all the sampling and then data collection and then data analysis. All right, so this follows a scientific approach, and it is suitable when diversity is not desired. Okay, so diversity in the sense, if your population is homogeneous, it's easier for you to select a sample. Right? If you don't want much of a diversity, so if you're in your population there are 1,000 people and all of them have diverse viewpoints, in which case it would be difficult for you to find a sample which would be homogeneous representation of the population. So sampling is more suitable in cases where diversity is not desired and the population is also more homogeneous. Okay, so that whatever sample you choose will be a true representation of the population. All right. What are the situations where you should be using sampling? Okay, so the first one we have when you have a large or infinite data size. As I told you, suppose your population has like 10,000 individuals, right? It's a pretty large number for one person to handle, right? In such cases, it would be smarter that you choose a smaller sample from this, maybe some 100, which you can handle easily. So sampling can be used or should be used when you have a large or infinite data where it would be difficult for one person to handle all of it. Okay. Secondly, if full accuracy is not required, right? So full accuracy means the exact accurate result you will get only if you are interviewing all these 10,000 people, right? So if you are taking a sample from this population, there would be some sort of minor compromise where the sample may not be the true representation of the population, or there may be diverse views in this population, so that the 100 you are choosing may not be giving you the exact result, right? But if you're okay with it, if the error margin that you have chosen allows you to, in that case you can use sampling because it has a host of other advantages. Like we just discussed, it allows you to save time, cost, resources. It lets you go in depth into the study. It's easier for you to perform analysis and manage the whole data. So you can decide what you want. If you want full accuracy, then you have to go with the census method, where you have to go and interview each and every individual in the population. But if you have that flexibility, if you don't need exact accuracy, in that case you can use sampling. Then the third scenario when to use sampling is when census is not possible, right? For example, you have 1 million individuals. Government takes annual census data, right, of every single individual in the in the country. So in such cases, what happens is that they involve a whole lot of people to do that. But when as a researcher, you have such a huge sample size, the huge population size, it will not be possible for you to go and talk to every single person in a state or maybe in a country, right? So for government it is easy, for it is the government census data, but for you it is your personal research, right? So in such cases where census is not possible, you can use sampling. Then finally, homogeneity. This means if the population is homogeneous, which means there won't be much of variability in these 10,000 people, right? So all of them would be almost similar, like they'll be homogeneous, or if you go and collect data, you are pretty much possible to get similar kind of data from everybody, right? So homogeneous means the population units in the population would be very similar to each other. There will not be much of a variability. In such cases, it would be good if you just choose a sample, because there won't be any outliers in the data. When whatever data you collect will fall in a common group or within a common range, right? So that's what it means by homogeneity. Right? So these are the 4 scenarios where you can use sampling. When your data size is large or your population is large and infinite, when you don't need full accuracy, you have some sort of an error margin, where census is not possible, and when your population is homogeneous. All right. Let's now look at some of the errors of sampling technique. So the first one would be accuracy, right? So sampling technique will always be less accurate than the census technique. So I told you, in census technique, you are going to collect data from every single individual from this population of 10,000, right? When it comes to sampling, you will be choosing a sample of 100 from this 10,000 and then collecting data from this 100. So this sampling will always be less accurate than the census technique. So you need to make sure that the sample is a random sample, so at least you can reduce any mistake or any inaccuracy. All right, so the first error would be that the result may be less accurate than the census technique. Secondly, changeability of units, right? So in a survey research, the concept of units mean the individual items or elements being studied, right? So every single individual in the population or in the sample is a unit, right? So if this unit changes over time or across different contexts, it would result in what would you say, error, right? So these units, if these units are not consistent or in harmony throughout the survey process, the chosen sampling technique can be compromised, leading to inaccurate or misleading results, right? So the unit or the sample you are choosing, each individual unit in that sample should remain consistent throughout your study. They should not change, right? Even though you are choosing a sample from a population, the units that you are choosing should remain consistent throughout the study. If you are changing the unit, then it may hamper the result. For example, I chose this 100, right? Of these, 10 people left the city, so they are no longer available for me to collect data. So I go back and get another 10 people from here, right? In this case, my sample unit has changed. It is not in harmony with each other. It was not consistent. So there is a good chance that my result is not, accurate. It can give me a less reliable result, right? So the changeability of units needs to be taken care of, because this is the potential source of error. So the individuals in the sample should remain consistent or in harmony with each other. Thirdly, false conclusions. So if you have not chosen the sample randomly, it will not be a true representation of the population, in which case it is very much possible that you will get a false conclusion. All right, I'll give you an example. So I want to study the success rate in online and offline examination in a university. Okay, so now instead of going through every single student or choosing a random sample, I am choosing people who I know from library. Okay, and all of them study really well, and all of them perform well in both online and offline examination. So what do you think? The result that I'm getting from my convenient sample, will that represent the whole university? No, right? So I have chosen my sample based on my convenience of being in the library, so that those people are easily accessible for me, so that I can collect data from them anytime. So all of them would have performed really well in the examination, and my sample does not have any of those people who fail to perform well in either online examination or offline examination, or in both, right? So my conclusions from my study is going to be a false one, and if I'm going to generalize it, it's going to be all the more wrong. So the sampling technique should be carefully conducted so that you can avoid false conclusion, right? Next, requirement of specific knowledge or expertise. So to collect a sample from a population, you need to have specific knowledge and expertise about the population and also about the sampling technique. You need to know about every aspect of the population to be able to choose a sample which would be a true representation of the whole population, right? Finally, impossible sampling, which means there are some scenarios where sampling is not possible. Example, when 100% accuracy is desired. If you need 100% accuracy, I told you cannot use sampling technique. You have to use census technique, right? So if you want 100% accuracy, sampling is not possible. It would give you an error. So if you have very less time, you don't have time to choose the sample, you will take data from whatever unit is available to you, or maybe even census. Right? So in this case also, it's not possible to have a true sample from the population. Finally, when high diversity is desired, if you desire high diversity, in that case also sampling is not possible, right? Because you have 10,000 different people, and you want all those different ideas or different, outputs. In such case, if you're going to take a sample of 100, you are losing out on that diversity, and when you are actually studying the diversity, right? So in case of sampling, we said that the population has to be homogeneous, and the sample also has to be homogeneous with the population. So if your study requires high diversity, sampling is not going to give you a good result. There is a good chance of error coming up, right? So these are the reasons of errors of sampling technique. Why a sampling technique can give a erroneous result. First of all, it's not as accurate as a census technique. Then the units must be kept consistent, and they should be in harmony. Then if the sample is not properly chosen, it can give false conclusions. Then a particular expertise and knowledge is required for you to perform the sampling in a population. And then there are cases where you would not be able to perform sampling, and if you do, you will not be able to get an accurate result, right? Like when 100% accuracy is desired, or when there is less time, or when high diversity is desired. All right. Let's see what are the qualities of an ideal sample. So first of all, it will be a true representation, which means the sample would represent the whole population truly. Whatever outcome or whatever result or inference you get from the sample will be true generalization of the whole population. So if I say that from the sample that I have obtained, that it's easier for students to qualify in offline examination than online examination, then that observation should hold true for the whole university, right? So that's what it means of true representation. Whatever sample you are getting, it should be true representation of the population, so that whatever result is obtained should hold true for both sample as well as the population, right? Second, each unit of a sample would be independent, right? So I told you I'm taking 100 from this 10,000, and the sample or the data I obtained from each unit of this 100 should be independent of each other, right? So it should not be that because one person is saying a particular thing, the rest of the group is also saying the same thing. No, that should not be there. So each unit should be independent of each other, right? So that even if you change one unit and replace it with another one, your data should not change, right? Now this is different from what? This is different from interchangeability of unit. We have to maintain a constant or harmony within the units, which is true. But here what it means is that the data you are obtaining from a particular unit should not be dependent on others. The data should be independent viewpoint of the participant of your study, right? If you are using human participants and you are asking them questions, the answer given by one person should not be dependent on another person. It should be independent, right? Thirdly, adequate. Matlab, the sample size should be adequate. If the sample size is too large, even then it would be a problem. If it is too less, even then it would be a problem when you are performing statistical analysis. So the sample size should be adequate enough for you to be able to conduct the study and generalize the results. Finally, homogeneous. The sample has to be homogeneous with the population. So whatever characteristics are exhibited by the sample, the same characteristics should be exhibited by the rest of the population also, right? So there should be less variability and high homogeneity. These are the 4 qualities of an ideal sample. Now that we have seen what is sampling and the characteristics and when to use the sampling and what an ideal sample looks like, let's look at the types of sampling. Now, we have already studied in our last video what is probability sampling and what is non-probability sampling. We have seen the difference between both the types. So I'm not going to explain the difference. Maybe you can go back and watch that video, right? So here I'm going to tell you what are the different types of sampling that we are going to study under each of these heading, right? So under probability sampling, we have simple random sampling, stratified sampling, systematic sampling, cluster sampling, and multi-stage sampling. Under non-probability sampling, we have convenience sampling, purposive sampling, quota sampling, referral sampling, or snowball sampling, right? And we start with the first, which is probability sampling techniques. Within probability sampling techniques, we are going to see the first one, which is simple random technique sampling. Simple random sampling, right? So what is simple random sampling? Here, each unit or element or individual from the population gets an equal opportunity to get selected. Now, this is the definition of the probability sampling, right? So this is same as what is simple random sampling, which means every single unit or every single element or every single individual from the population has an equal chance or equal probability or an equal opportunity to get selected into the sample, right? So this technique is applied when the researcher does not have knowledge about the target population beforehand. Right? If the researcher does not know about the target population, it's wise that you choose random samples from the population. Like, selection is free from any kind of personal bias or preference of the researcher. That's why it is called random sampling, right? So here there is no kind of personal bias from the researcher which is playing in the sampling process. All right? How to do simple random sampling? Let's see what are the different methods that are used for simple random sampling. Alright, so the first we have lottery method. Here, as the name suggests, we assign each unit a particular number. Okay, and then these numbers are written on identical pieces of paper and put in a box. Okay, then a neutral person who is blindfolded is made to pull out the required number of units from the sample in the box for the sample from the box. All right, we have done this a lot of time, right, while playing and all. So we have a box in which we make chits, and the chits might have the number which is representing a particular unit, or if they are people, maybe you can write the name of the individuals and then put it in the box. And then a neutral person who is not a part of the study will be called out, and this person will be blindfolded and made to pull out the required number of units, right? This is called lottery method. This will also provide you with a simple random sample, okay, where each and every individual has an equal probability of being selected into the sample. All right. So secondly, we have the rotating drum method. So in simple rotating drum method, what we do is we just write the chits, assign numbers to each of the units, write those numbers in chits or papers or on, maybe pieces of wood or, tin, and then put it in a rotating drum and then rotate the drum and randomly select. Okay. Another way to do this is that you are going to, if I have 100 people, I am going to provide them categories. Like the first person is 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And after this again start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In this way, I have these 100 people divided into these 5 categories. Yeah. So I have few people who have got 0 number, few people who have got 1 number, few people who have got 2 number. This way, I have different numbers of people who have got each of these categories. Right, and then I am going to put, like if I have like 20 people with 0, I'll have 20 pieces of wood or 20 pieces of tin with number 0 written on it. Okay, if I have like maybe another 20 people who have got 1, then I will have similarly 20 pieces of wood or tin with the number 1 written on it. So in this way, I will have a piece of wood or tin representing all my 100 people, right? Then the drum is rotated after all these pieces are put in the drum, and then randomly, like if I need 20 sample from this 100, I'll be randomly choosing 20 of these wooden tin or cans, right? So now what happens is that, suppose I have picked 5 zeros, 10 5s and 20 2s, which means I need 35, not 20. So if I want to select 35 units from my population of 100, and I have chosen 5 zeros, 10 5s and 20 2s, this means out of all the people who have got 0, I will be choosing 5 people, right? Out of all the people who have got maybe 5 number, out of all the people who come under the category of 5, I'll choose 10 people. and out of all the people who have got number 2, I'll choose 20 people. Right? So this is how rotating drum method happens. This ensures that every single person has a equal probability of being chosen into the sample. Right? So here first we are categorizing everyone, right? And then we are, for each individual we are providing that category and then putting that in the drum. So every single individual will be represented as a category in the drum, right? And then from that drum we'll be choosing each category. Alright, so now there is a second level of random sampling here, that out of my people, maybe if I have 20 people who have 0 number, from them also I'm randomly choosing 5. Right? So here there are 2 levels of random sampling happening. First, the category is randomly chosen, and from the category individuals are chosen at random. Alright. Okay, so next we have selection based on sequential list. So here the units are broken up into numerical, alphabetical or geographical sequence and selected randomly. Okay, so this means I have a class of 50 students and I'm going to tell everyone to, from one corner start counting 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the 5th person again starts 1, 2, 3, 4, right? In this way, I have in the class students who are divided into 1s, 2s, 3s and 4, right? And then I'm telling all the people with 2 to come out, right? So now I have a random sample from that class of everyone who counted 2. Right? So from my numerical list, I have randomly chosen a set of students whom I study. Or if I'm assigning alphabets to them, maybe I can say all the people who got vowels, please come out. Right? So from that sequential list, I'm getting all the people randomly who got vowels. Right? So this is how selection is done using a sequential list. Alright? Then, what are the precautions that we should take care of while doing simple random sampling? First of all, the researcher should be aware of the entire variation present in the population from which he or she wants to select his or her sample, right? And she or he should be aware of the main features of the field and its scope with the number of units in the population so as to make fair selection. Which means whatever study you are doing, how many units in the population are capable of being in that study, right? If you are choosing random people, there would be some people who are not feasible for your study, who will not be able to contribute for your study. So that will be giving you a very skewed population or skewed sample, right? So here you need to make sure that the scope of the number of units you can obtain from the population that would help you in your study so that you are able to make a fair selection. Alright? The various items in the population must be similar and have common characteristics, which means the population has to be homogeneous. If they differ too much, then the sample will not be representative. This also we have discussed, right? If you want to have simple random sampling, you have to make sure that the population is homogeneous, which means every single unit exhibits similar characteristics, or whatever criteria you are using for your study, all the population should exhibit that particular criteria and should be homogeneous in nature. If there is too much variability, then the sample will not be a representative as you are expecting for your study, right? The units of the field should not be dependent or linked, otherwise it will not be possible for a random selection to take place, which means each and every individual that you are choosing should be independent of each other. It's not like if I am chosen, then with my friend will also be chosen automatically, right? There should not be any such linking. So only then there would be a chance of random selection. So each unit should be independent of each other, right? After simple random sampling, under probability sampling, we have stratified sampling. Okay, so here a larger population are divided into smaller, distinct subgroups called strata. Right? This division is based on common characteristics, and each strata of a population will have different characteristics, and each participant is selected randomly from each strata to obtain a representative sample, which means I have a big sample, right? Let's say I have triangles, I have squares, I have circles, then I have diamonds, right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to divide my sample into 4 units based on a common characteristics, which means I will put all triangles here, right? I'll put all circles here, I will have all squares here, right? And I will have all my diamonds here. Okay, so now within each strata, everybody would have a common characteristics, like, and between each strata, these characteristics are different, right? And then from this particular strata, I'll choose my sample randomly using simple random sampling, right? I might need 5 from here, I might take 5 from here, I might take 5 from here, I might take 5 from here. In this way, I have divided my population based on a common characteristics into different strata, and from each strata, I am going to choose sample randomly. Alright, this is called stratified sampling, where I am first dividing my population into strata and then randomly choosing a sample from each strata. Okay, this ensures that each important subgroup within the population is adequately represented in the study, right? So this ensures that everybody is sufficiently represented in the population, in the sample. All right. This technique ensures more precise and reliable results, especially when each subgroup is different from the other, right? So if in a geographical area we have different types of people, like maybe different tribes or maybe different caste or different subgroups, so here we use stratified sampling, where you are dividing the population into different tribes, and then from each tribe you are choosing people to represent the population, right? So this is stratified sampling. Now, what are the precautions that we need to take while doing stratified sampling? The researcher should have in-depth information about all units in the data and should be able to identify the common characteristics to bunch them together into subgroups that are different from each other. Right? So the researcher should know that there exist different triangle people and different square people and then different circle people and different diamond people. Only when the researcher know about all these different types, only then he'll be able to create strata. Right? Then each stratum should be large enough to conduct random sampling. Right? So if I need 5 people, it should not be that my strata also has 5 people. My strata should have at least 50 people for me to be able to have a random sample of 5 people. Then, while dividing them into subgroups, it must be considered that each stratum is related to the population in a similar way, though being homogeneous themselves, which means the population, this particular stratum within should be homogeneous to each other, right? But they should be similarly related to the whole population also. Okay, so with this strata, all of them should be different from each other, but it should have something common with the population also. So we are, like, for example, I am trying to study the socio-economic status, right? So that socio-economic status that I want to study of the population should be equally represented by my strata also. Okay, so I have various communities within the population in my strata, right, representing the population, which are different from each other, but studying them should give me a good idea about the socio-economic status of the whole population, right? So they are different from each other, but they are related to the population in a similar way. All of them are related to the population in a similar way, but independent from each other, different from each other, right? Then the number of units chosen from each subgroup for the study through random sampling must be in the same proportion as the subgroup is to the entire population, which means if in my population this particular triangle represents 50%, right? The square represents 30% and maybe this circle represents 20%, right? So in my sample also, it should be in the same ratio, 5:3:2, right? So whatever is the ratio of my strata in the population, it should be similar in my sample also. I should not be taking equal number of people from all the three samples, right? Because that will not be a true representation of the population. If my population have all these three groups in 5:3:2 ratio, my sample also should have the same proportion. Understood? So these are the precautions that need to be taken while performing stratified sampling. Then the next we have cluster sampling, right? So here what we are going to do is the entire population is divided into smaller natural groups called clusters, right? And one or more clusters are randomly selected and every member of the chosen cluster participate in the study. Now this sounds very similar like stratified sampling, right? Here also what we are doing, we are going to divide our sample into clusters, right? But how is it different from stratified sampling? It is different from stratified sampling because if I have my square and all these in the sample, then my cluster will also have square also, triangle also, circle also, right? So all my cluster will have all the groups, right? So I am not dividing my cluster based on a specific characteristic. Okay, so how do I give out an example? So let's say I want to divide a country into different regions, okay, and then I want to randomly select a few regions to sample and I want to interview everyone within those regions. So what I would do, I would simply take a country and then divide that into different regions, which would be my cluster, right? And from this cluster, I will be randomly choosing one such cluster or one such region, and from that region, every single person would be participating in the study. So in stratified sampling, what did we do? We again chose individuals randomly from the strata, right? Here, the whole cluster is chosen and every single member in the cluster will be participating in the study. Hope you understood the difference between cluster sampling and stratified sampling, right? So in stratified sampling, my strata will have all squares, the other strata all triangles, the other strata all circles. In cluster, my cluster will have all the three. They will have square, triangle and circle, right? In stratified sampling, there would be further random sampling happening within the strata. Not every single individual in the strata will be participating in the study. But in cluster, the whole cluster is chosen at random. Right? If I have three clusters here, I'll be randomly choosing one cluster and from every individual in that cluster will be participating in the study. So that is cluster sampling. Alright. Then we use two methods in cluster sampling. First is single stage cluster sampling, where we are just dividing the population into cluster and then whole cluster is randomly selected and used for the study. Okay, now there is two-stage cluster sampling where first the cluster is randomly chosen and from this primary cluster a sample of smaller subclusters or individual units are selected, which means we have a population, we are selecting them into different clusters, right? And out of this we are choosing one simple cluster and then we are further dividing that cluster into smaller subclusters, right? And then we are choosing another subcluster and then everyone in that subcluster will be participating in the study. So there is two stages of cluster sampling happening here. Okay, so maybe this would be a country and this would be all the states, and within the states we are dividing them into different districts, right? And from that districts we are choosing everyone for the study. Alright, I hope you understood what is cluster sampling. Now finally we have systematic sampling. What is systematic sampling? So here the sample members are selected from a larger population at regular predetermined intervals after a random starting point. Okay, which means if I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is a simple example. Okay, so I am going to choose a random starting point. So maybe my starting point is 3. Okay, now from here I'm going to choose every second individual, which means every second means I'll then choose 5, 7, 9, then maybe 11, right? So first I choose a random start point, and from the random start point I'll be choosing items from every regular interval for my sample. Okay, now this is practical and efficient method for larger populations. All right. So how is this done? First of all, we have to identify the population. I'm going to identify the population first. And then secondly, create a sampling frame, a list of all the members in the population. So I might have 1,000 members in the population, right? So my population size, capital N, is equal to 1,000. And I have a list where I have 1, 2, 3 up till 10,000 people, all the names listed. Right? And then I'm going to determine the sample size, like what is the size of my sample that I required. So suppose my sample size is 10. Okay, I want only 10 people from this 1,000 people. Okay, now sample interval K is calculated. In what frequency or in what interval you have to choose the person. So that is 1,000 capital N divided by 10, which is sample size. So I get 100, which means I can choose every 100th person. But where do I start from? The random starting point is selected between 1 to k, right? Which means my k is what, 100, no? So I am going to select my starting point from 1 to from 1 to 100. So in my list, from 1 to 100, I will choose a random starting point. It might be maybe 53. Okay, if it is 53, in which case after 53 the first person plus 100, the next 153 would be my next candidate. Add 100 to it, 253 would be my next candidate. Every 100th person starting from 53 will be chosen for my study. It's okay, so every kth member will be selected. Let me repeat this. First of all, we identify the population, and then we are creating a whole list of the people in that population, and we are going to determine the population size. So if my population size is 1,000, so capital N is 1,000, and then I want to decide what should be the number in my sample, which is small n. So I have chosen 10 here, right? Then I have to choose the interval, like at what frequency or what interval I have to choose the person. So my formula is k is equal to capital N by small n, which is 1,000 by 10, which is equal to 100 for me, which means I can choose every 100th person. Now where do I start from? Right? So I can choose the starting point from anywhere between 1 to k. My k is 100, right? So 1 to 100. So I can choose simple random technique to choose any number from this 1 to 100. And whatever number I get, for example, I told you if I get 53, that would be my number one person, and then every 100th person or every kth person would be chosen to be in my sample. All right, I hope you understood this. This is called systematic sampling. Then finally, we have multi-stage sampling. Now, what is multi-stage sampling? Here, the population is divided into larger groups or clusters, such as country being divided into states and districts. From these primary cluster, random sample is selected. Okay, so if I have divided a country into states, I'm going to select a state. Okay. This chosen cluster is further divided into smaller units. So since I have a state, I'm going to divide that state into different districts. Okay. Now this was the two-state sampling cluster sampling that we studied, right? But here we are not stopping at 2. Okay. After district, we are going to further divide this into what? Maybe towns. Right? Then we will randomly choose one town and then further divide it into village. Right? Within the village also, maybe we can choose further units based on any characteristics, or maybe if it is, if there are different residential clusters in the village, we can choose those residential clusters, or maybe community staying in a village. Okay, so this is repeated till a cluster cannot be further divided into a smaller cluster. Okay, so you keep dividing the population to smaller clusters till you can no longer divide a cluster into smaller sample. right? The final sample involves individuals chosen from the last of the cluster. So whatever is the final cluster, from here you randomly choose individuals for your study. Alright, so this is multi-stage sampling, where you have multiple stages of sampling, right? Country divided into states, and then you are randomly choosing the state. From state you are dividing it into districts, where you are randomly choosing the district further broken down, and then you are randomly selecting, and this continues till you cannot break anything further. Alright, so this is multi-stage sampling. That were all the techniques of probability sampling. Let's look at the advantages of probability sampling. So it's easier to undertake, lesser degree of preconceived notions and judgment involved. We don't have to think about anything, like you don't have to judge the population or the sample or anything. The research findings are highly reliable. Why? Because our sample is going to be a true representation of the population. Sampling error can be estimated accurately. Right? If you are performing simple random sampling, it's easier for you to identify the sampling error, and you can minimize the error also. Right? It's easily performed even on non-technical persons. Right? Even if the person is non-technical, even if the the individuals that are supposed to be a part of your study are non-technical, even then you can perform. Right? It's easier to write chits and pick the name. Okay? It's easier for you to put it in a drum and pick the name. Right? So you can apply the sampling technique even in non-technical persons, and there would be no sampling and systematic bias. So probability sampling reduces or prevents any sampling or systematic bias. So these are the advantages of probability sampling. They have certain disadvantages also, which is that it is very monotonous. It's very boring, keep on choosing random sampling, randomly choose, select. Sometimes it can get monotonous for the researcher also. There is a chance that only a very specific class may be chosen. Okay, now this is random. You were not doing anything deliberately. Even then it is possible that a particular class is being chosen every time. Right? But you cannot change that, because then that would change the probability. Right? So there is a specific chance that only a certain class may be chosen every time. The degree of complexity is higher, right? So it's not easy that you can't just go around and choose people. You have to put your head into it, right, to choose the person. And this is generally more time consuming and costly. I hope you understand that, right? So these are the disadvantages of probability sampling. So we just finished the techniques under probability sampling. We just saw what is simple random sampling. Every individual has the equal chance of being selected. Under that we saw the lottery method, we saw the drum method, we saw the sequential method, right? And then we saw stratified sampling, where we are dividing the population into strata, and then from each strata you are randomly choosing your sample. Then we saw systematic sampling also, where we are going to systematically choose a sample from the list, right, on regular intervals after choosing a random starting point. Then we have cluster sampling, where you are dividing the population into clusters, and every single member in the cluster will be a part of the study. And then we saw multi-stage sampling, where you are dividing the population till you can no longer divide it. Right? So this was probability sampling. Now we move on to non-probability sampling. Okay, and what do we have? We have convenience sampling, purposive sampling, quota sampling, and referral or snowball sampling. Right? So we start with non-probability sampling techniques. Under non-probability sampling technique, we have the first, which is purposive sampling. So this is a sampling which is being performed based on a particular purpose that the researcher has, right? So this is also called deliberate sampling. The researcher is selecting a sample deliberately based on a purpose. It allows the investigator to choose the sample as per his or her whims with complete freedom. Okay, no rules. I'll choose anyone as I wish. Alright. Simple technique used by the investigator when the data is not diverse and he or she has knowledge of various facets of the problem. So purposive sampling would be successful only when the data is not that diverse and the researcher has a knowledge of every particular problem that can arise from it. All right. So it is determined by the purpose or intent of the study, and selection is done on the suitability of elements for the purpose of study, which means a researcher is going to decide whether they want to do purposive sampling or not based on what is their objective or the purpose of the study, right? And the selection is done based on the suitability. Like if a person is suitable for my study, I'll just go simply and tell the person or request the person to be a part of my study. All right. So this is purposive sampling. Based on my purpose, if the person is suitable, if the sample is suitable, I'll choose as I wish. No rules. Except that the person should be, suitable for my study. All right. Next, I have quota sampling. Quota sampling means the population is divided equally among the investigators, and each of them is required to pick a certain number of items from his or her subgroup to form the sample, which means I have a population. What I'm going to do is I am going to pick maybe juniors or research fellows or research assistants, and then I'm going to divide my population into each of them. Okay, I'm dividing my population into different subgroups and provide each of them with a subgroup, and these people have to choose sample from their subgroups and then perform the study, right? This method is dependent on honesty and proficiency of the investigator for its success. Okay, since the proficiency of the investigator is subjective and varied, the result of the study tend to be erroneous. Thus this method is seldom used, right? So if I'm choosing the people, I'm choosing the investigator who I am providing the subgroup, if they are not honest or if they are not proficient enough, then my study will not be a success, right? So, and this is a very subjective. If I am choosing 4 people, all 4 of them will have different levels of expertise or maybe accuracy, right? So the result all 4 of them are giving me may not be exactly uniform or same. There could be error, right? So that's why quota sampling is not mostly performed, because there would be a higher level of subjectivity and error. All right. Why? Because the different investigators are all different in nature and different in expertise and different in temperament. All right. Then we have thirdly convenience sampling. Here what happens? Elements or items of the study are selected as per the convenience of the investigator, has zero scientific credibility, and is termed as hit or miss method. Now, how is this different from purposive sampling? At least there is a purpose, right? The investigator is first going to check whether the people are the person who they are choosing not randomly, as per their wish, are suitable for the study or not, right? Here nothing, no such thing. I want to do some research, I'll look around. If I find convenient, as per my convenience, I'm choosing the person. If the person is good enough, it's a hit. If the person is not good enough, it's a miss. Okay, it's simply convenience sampling. Okay, it's different from purposive sampling. Purposive sampling also the researcher is going to choose as per his whim and convenience, but still there is a purpose involved. Here nothing. Okay, I mean the research will have a purpose, but this researcher will not be putting that purpose to the front. They'll be just putting their convenience into front. As per their convenience, they are going to just choose people and conduct the study. So you can imagine what the result would be like, right? Then finally we have the referral or snowball sampling. Okay, so when the researcher is completely unaware about the population, they pick one element or individual and asks him or her for reference or recommendation of other individuals whose characteristics are suited for the study. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I don't know about the population, I don't know anyone, I don't know who will be suitable for my study. So when I get the first person who agrees to all my criteria of a good sample, I'll ask this person that if this person knows anyone else who will be able to similarly tick all my needs, all my criteria of a sample. So if this person has a friend who's also in a similar situation or a similar character or a similar individual who's best suited for the study, I'll ask this person to recommend the person. Okay, so if I am chosen, I know 10 other people who are like me, I'll bring them with me. So that is snowball technique, right? And why is this called snowball technique? Because the size of the sample constantly grow as new referrals keep pouring in. Have you seen a snowball? It would be small, right? First, as it rolls, its size increases because more snow sticks to it. So this is similar. If you get one person, that one person will bring another 2%. This 2 might bring more such people, right? In this way, the sample increases. So this is called snowball technique. So this is not random technique. This is snowball technique where each of these referrals are coming based on what they know, who each of these person know. All right. So this was referral or snowball sampling. Now let's look at the advantages of non-probability sampling. So in case an individual is not willing to participate, he or she can be easily replaced by someone else, right? So in random sampling, this would have been a headache, right? We need to keep the units constant or uniform, right? But here, no such criteria. If a person goes, anybody can come back in. Right? This is less expensive. No rules involved. Just randomly go around and choose people as you want. Right? It's highly time effective. You don't have to waste any time choosing the sample. Sampling methods are easy to execute. Right? Like purposive sampling. If I know the purpose of my study and what kind of people I want, I can just randomly go around and choose. I can go around and choose randomly, which means I'm not using random or probability sampling, but I'm using my convenience or my wish to choose the person, right? And if I don't want to, give much importance to the purpose, even then I can just randomly go out and then choose people as I want, as per my convenience. Like whoever I see first, I'm asking the person, okay, come. There's no rules involved, okay? When I say randomly here, it doesn't mean I'm using probability sampling. I'm just simply going around and choosing people. Okay. So these are the advantages of non-probability sampling. It's time effective, easy to execute, less expensive, right? And every individual is easily replaceable. Finally, disadvantages of non-probability sampling. We have only accessible individuals are chosen, and this reduces the chance of assimilating important data. Right? So if I am doing the study, the people in my sample would be only people I know or who are accessible to me, right? So this could give me a very wrong data. Secondly, there is no way to judge the accurate representation of the population. Population will not be a true representation, and there is no way to find out also. Okay? There is too much dependence on researcher's judgment. So if I feel this person is good for my research, this person is then good for research. Okay, so the whole sampling is based on my judgment, what I think. There is no way to estimate the margin of error. Since there is no random or probability sampling, there is no way to find out what is the error in the sampling also. There can be a bias while selecting units, right? So if in my class there are 30 people and I can use all of my classmates for my study, but I don't like 10 of them. So I'm not going to use them. I'm going to use only the 20 that I like. So that is my bias. Okay. So here there can be a bias while selecting units. And it does not focus on effectiveness, instead thrives on simplicity. Like what is the easiest method? What is the most convenient method? There is no science here, there is no data here, there is no effectiveness here. Just what is easy for me, what I can do fast, quickly without making much effort. Alright, so these are the disadvantages of non-probability sampling. And that was all about this particular unit on different probability and non-probability sampling techniques. Let's now look at some of the previous year questions. The first question we have is from December 2024. It says, differentiate between probability and non-probability sampling and describe multi-stage sampling. So here you have to write the differences between probability and non-probability sampling and what are the different techniques used, right? So there is a tabulated column of differences which I have discussed in the previous video. Maybe you can go and watch that. Right? This is for 10 marks. And then we had a 5 marks part question The June 2023, write short notes on the following in about 150 words each, which is simple random sampling. Right? In the same year, we had another question. Discuss the non-probability sampling techniques, 10 marks. So you have to discuss the purposive sampling, the selective, the convenient sampling, and then snowball sampling. And there was one more technique that we discussed, right? So you have to write all four of them under non-probability sampling techniques. Then we have described the various criteria involved in sampling for 10 marks in December 2023. All right, this also we have discussed. I think we have discussed this in previous video also, right? And then December 2022, we have discussed the techniques of probability sampling. Okay, we know which are the techniques and you have to describe them for 10 marks. Then in December 2021, we have described the purpose and types of sampling. Explain the criteria to infer appropriate sample size. All right, so these are the questions that has appeared previously from this topic.
Thank you all for learning with me. If you found the video helpful, make sure you let me know by hitting the like button. Make sure you share the video with your friends too. Subscribe to make sure that you don't miss out on any of the new videos. You can reach me by simply dropping a comment. See you in the next one. Till then, happy learning.